Hello students, welcome to Careers360. Today I'm going to talk about something which really bothers me and should be bothering every single student out there. Every student who's taking an admission in a college or in a BTech college or an MBA college or even getting into a coaching institution. The amount of misleading claims that these colleges, these universities and these coaching institutions do just to ensure that the next customer comes in so they can make a few lakh rupees more is appalling. But the student is left to fend for themselves. There is nothing that they can go back to and file a complaint and get something out. You need to go to the police station, you need to go to the Consumer Affairs Ministry. And the kind of penalty that is levied by these ministries also is abysmal, that there is no punitive action against the university because of which they continue to do the same thing. You would have seen many things in terms of ads. The 50 lakh rupees highest placement, 1 crore, 1.5 crore, 2.5 crore, 3 crores. It looks like it's been a race to the bottom in terms of the misleading claims that they do, but at the same time the highest salary keeps going up. Same thing, these same colleges will talk to you about the top 10% students, how much they're getting, top 50%. They never talk about the bottom 10%. They never talk of the number of students who are not passing out. They never talk of the number of students who were not placed. That is completely whitewashed. Very recently, there was this result of UPSC examination that happened. This is from the coaching institution side now. 9.92 lakh students registered for the examination. 958 students ultimately succeeded, which is 0.1%. 0.1%. And for these 958 students, a lot of claimants of how they were a part of their process and how they taught them and how because of them someone became a civil servant. But no one talks about the 9.91 lakh students. As they say, success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan, which is the case at this point in time. In fact, when we looked at the data of the UPSC toppers, the data was very shocking. Because from rank 1 to 10, which are 10 toppers that you have, the number of institutions that claim is 57. So for each successful topper, there were 5.7 claimants that those students studied with these people, or these institutions had some kind of a role in that person becoming a civil servant. And by the way, I'm not including many others who are the online players who also claim. I only scanned some of the advertisements in the newspapers and came out with this number. When I look at rank 11 to 20, for each successful topper, there were 2.7 claimants. But the moment I came down to rank 100 to 200, it became 0.39, which means there is no claimant. And by the way, if you look at it, some institution has claimed that 538 students of the 958 were belong to them. Someone else claimed 200 plus in their video lessons. And everyone seems to be claiming that the 200 plus IAS officers at this point in time who passed out of UPSC were because of they were trained by this coaching institution. Each topper has many people who claiming that it is because of them that they became a topper. The topper farming is a business in this country. You don't talk about the failures. In this particular case, 9.91 lakh students, no one will talk about it. But the 1,000 students will have a lot of claimants that are coming back. Why do they do that? Because by showing that 1,000 students, they bring the other 10 lakh students. That is the game that we're dealing with. And same is with the college also in terms of placement that happened. They talk of the highest salary, 1 crore, 1.5 crore, 2 crore, 2.5 crores. But they will never talk of how many students were a part of the thing. If any institution were to actually rightfully claim the thing, they should say that my batch is 1,000 students, of which I placed 700 students. Of the 700 students, 10 people got so much salary. Have a complete detailed report. If you are talking of the top 10%, talk of the bottom 10%. If you talk of the highest salary, talk of the lowest salary also. But is there a code of conduct that happens in these universities? No. And that is where we all need to step in. Very recently, there was a very stunning case of a person called Avadut Sathe. He used to run a securities training academy or shares trading academy. And he was making a lot of claims to get those students in, to be trained by the academy. Thankfully, it was not under UGC. Thankfully, it was not under the Ministry of Education. Thankfully, it was not under AICTE. Rather, thankfully, it is not in the education format itself. Though he was training people on certain things. It was an academy. But because it was into stock trading, it came on the purview of SEBI, which is Securities Exchange Board of India. And when that happened and when SEBI stepped in, it took a suo motu case against Avadut Sathe. They found that the claims based on which they enlisted many more students to be trained at their academy, the claims themselves were wrong. They found that 3.37 lakh students were trained in the academy. And they ordered that all the 3.37 lakh students should be reimbursed their fees. The penalty imposed on Abdul Sate was 546 crores. The fee collected was 601 crores, but the gains, unlawful gains that Abdul Sate gained because of mis-selling was 546 crores is what SEBI determined. And they filed a case for disgorgement, which means that Abdul Sate is supposed to pay 546 crores to SEBI so that they can refund every single student who was trained in the academy. As of now, he could only pay 100 crore rupees as a deposit, and they're fighting a case in the courts. But the fact is, SEBI took a suo motu, which means they took a decision to investigate by themselves. No student complained. SEBI went in and got the whole thing going. But if it comes to UGC, they will simply pass the buck. Very recently, in the last month itself, there was this notice that was given by UGC saying these 32 universities are fake universities. And I've been seeing this particular notification for ages now. Many years I've been seeing it. Since 2010, I've been seeing this notice where every year UGC comes up with the same names and says that we're going to take action, but no action is taken and the university exists. And some of the names of these universities, when you look at it, you would wonder how can even such universities even exist. And by the way, many of these universities are in Delhi, right under the nose of CBA, right under the nose of UGC, right under the nose of Ministry of Education. But they continue to function because they know that UGC will not take action against them. Look at the names, some of these names you have. You have Vishwakarma Open University. It's operating from Delhi. United Nations University, operating from Delhi. In 2023 also I saw the same thing. In 2021 also I saw the same name. Commercial University. Adhyatmik Vishwavidyalaya, which is spiritual university. And the names are on and on and on. The same names get repeated. The same names exist. The same names are repeated as fake universities, but there is no action taken against those universities who are actually operating under these. And you would know, and I would know, that we are such a country that gullible people will still go there and take admission because the name university is attached to the name itself. And that is the problem that we're talking about. The amount of protection that the students in this country have is next to nothing. Assuming this coaching institution, whatever they claimed in this UPSC toppers list, is supposed to be wrong, then all that the consumer affairs ministry would do is to fine them 10 lakh, 15 lakh, 20 lakh. Every year these things happen. About 28 institutes were fined last year about 15, 20 lakh rupees and so on and so forth. But no criminal action is taken. No action the way SEBI did, which says ki you have made a claim, so let you repay back every single student because your entire selling pitch was based on a false premise, is not done as far as these institutions are concerned. And the students have to complain, they will have to go from pillar to post. And students don't have that energy, the stamina, the perseverance, the time to file or fight a case of this nature because they're dealing with powerful people who have deep pockets. They would pay 15-20 lakh rupees fine very easily while making 500 crore rupees of income from the same students. Because you're dealing with about 1 million students coming in every single year, joining this bandwagon of wanting to be an UPSC officer when the success rate is 0.1%. And that is the problem that we're dealing with. Why is it that UGC, AICTE, Ministry of Education doesn't let students get protected? Why is it that we don't impose a code of conduct on all these universities, all these institutions, all these coaching institutions to make sure that what they tell is truth, and assuming it's a lie, the student has a right to get the entire fee reimbursed? Why is it that we let universities go for these kind of large claims and full page ads where they talk of crores of packages, 100% placement and all, which we know is not legally binding because it's an ad, and UGC and all don't have the teeth, those powers to actually go after these institutions. That is a bigger problem that we're dealing with because there are far too many lies being told to the students. The students are left to themselves to fend for themselves. They go all over the place trying to understand how it works, but nothing happens. And the worst thing that happens is, assuming a student complains to UGC, what does UGC do? UGC forwards that same complaint to the university saying this complaint has come to us, please deal with it appropriately. The university also gets to know that the student complained against them. Just imagine what the student goes through at that process. And that is a problem that I'm very worried about. The student that is not protected. An investor who invested 1,000 rupees in a share or a stock market or a fixed deposit is protected by SEBI. But a student who's investing 15, 20 lakh rupees of their life, of their monies, a lot of money, and 4 years of their life, hoping that it will build a career for them, build a life for them, are not protected at this point in time. The students are on the streets. Every single year, we see batches and batches of students who got into a college based on a wrong claim. But they can't do anything but go through the process, sit through the college for 4 years, come out and understand that what's been sold to them was a dummy, which is a false and misleading claim and a lie. And that is what we need to be fighting about. We should be fighting to ensure that our students are protected. We should be fighting to ensure that the universities tell the truth. Those same universities which tell the student that they must always be truthful, never tell a truth. They actually lie. A lot more universities actually lie to get the next batch of students in. Education today is a business. It's no longer an activity which is for purpose to ensure that students get educated, learn it, and become a constructive of people for this country. We're no longer talking of an education being a charitable activity. Of course, there would be a few people who will be doing that, but a large proportion of that. You open the newspaper, once the results come out, you'll realize that it's not a charitable activity, it's not a social service, it is business. And if it is a business, then student must be protected. Everywhere, the kind of many institutions now give degrees when they are not even universities. They partner with universities and through a franchisee model start doing that. And assuming at some point in time UGC clamps down on it, the student loses out because the university will still be a university. This company will find a way out. But the student who's joined in hoping that he'll get a degree after 4 years will suddenly say, okay, my degree is not valid. My degree is a tissue paper and nothing more. And that is something that really, really bothers us. We are leading our children to a very, very crucial path where everything that comes out of it after 4 years or 3 years after they finish their education might not be what has been promised to them. And we as a country must act on this. We must deal with it the way SEBI protects every single small investor in this country. I think education demands that there should be a regulator which protects every single student in this country. Whether they're paid to a coaching institution or a training academy or a skilling academy or a college or a university, they must be protected. There must be an overarching picture where there's a single regulator which has the powers to punish coaching institutions, colleges, universities, skilling academies, or whatever it is, and ensure that every single student is compensated if they've got into it based on a false premise. And the only way we can do that is to ensure that we start demanding from ministry and UGC and all that you step aside because you have failed the student community. Let us bring in one regulator the way SEBI is, and then come up with this solution of how do we protect the student. Across the board, last year, Vision IAS was fined by the Consumer Affairs Ministry for false and misleading claims. The fine is about 15-20 lakh rupees. For a company of the size of Vision IAS, they'll be more than happy to pay the 20 lakh rupees and continue doing the same thing again and again. And this year also, they claimed a lot of numbers to be from their own institution. Same thing with Classic IAS Academy. And I can go on and on. The list is endless at this point in time as far as I'm concerned. We actually tracked about 25 coaching institutes to understand how these claims happen and what is the kind of role that the institute played in terms of that student succeeding in the examination. Very few give that. And assuming they give that, it is the interview guidance program or some free mock test. In fact, very recently, one big founder claimed that 200 plus civil servants were from their academy. When someone investigated the whole thing, not more than 10 were actually students who paid in that institute to be trained for the prelims and mains examination. All the others, they would have registered at the mock test level and cleared the examination. The effort was all the student, but the coaching institution claims it. And why do they do that? Because they want to entice the next 1-2 lakh students to, pay them to be their students, so that again another 10 students can pass out. This is a pandemic at this point in time. The issue of claims is a pandemic. Everyone claims. No one delivers. Even in coaching, they know that students who are very, very good are moved to the central office and the central branch so that the best faculty is taught to them. They also know, by the way, that many of the students who are in the regional centers or local centers are not capable of getting in. But they keep giving them promises. And by the way, they also keep giving them higher marks so that the hope is, kept intact. Because if you suddenly say that you're getting 35-40% marks, the student walks away. So what do? They actually keep giving them good marks and say that you are very close and you are in touching distance and so on and so forth, so that the parents are happy, the student is happy. But when the actual results come, they suddenly realize that it's not mapping up. And this is a pandemic, again I'm saying, all because most of these institutions look at students as a customer. They don't look at a student as a person who's trying to build their own career and a life. They look at them as a customer. Now let's come to the universities and colleges. In universities and colleges, there's a massive racket that happens. All of them, first of all, talk of the highest salary, the top 10%, and the median salary. No one. Now, my simple thing is, if you're able to talk about the highest salary, can you talk about the lowest salary? If you talk about the top 10% salary, can you talk about the bottom 10% salary? Can you talk of the number of students who are in the batch? Can you give me the data of, at a branch-wise, how many students were actually sanctioned as an intake, how many students were admitted, how many students sat for placement, and how many students actually got placed at a branch level? And also, along with the fact that I need to get the median salary at a branch level, median and the top 10% and bottom 10% at a branch level, and the average salary at the branch level. But what do? They give me the highest salary only. Because for sure, one student would get it. And based on the one student, you start monetizing the every other student. When we looked at data of the lowest salary, even IIMs have a lowest salary of 3.5, 4, 5 lakh rupees. IIM Calcutta has a lowest salary of 6 lakh rupees. NITs have a lowest salary of 2.75 lakh rupees. But they don't talk of that unless people like us push for more information and start talking about it. There are NITs in this country which don't even place 35-40% of the students. There are IITs in this country, the best IITs, who are unable to place about 30-40% students of some of the branches. But that is branch-wise data. The IIT still will go and claim that 90% students placed. And they talk of median salary because the median salary is across the branches. The problem is not that the IIT is disclosing it this way. The problem is that the best students are falling for that claim and getting into a certain domain or a certain branch which doesn't have any opportunities of placement. And to that extent, the top 1 percentile of the country are being misled to get onto something which they don't really deserve. They could have got onto something else and been much more successful than if they were not to be believing only in this part of the claim. Because these are part claims. The other half is not disclosed. Only one half is disclosed. Across the institutions, at this point in time, making a false claim on placement is a racket. Because they know that if they can make a claim on placement, students come in hordes. You watch TV, you watch the newspaper every single day. The kind of placement ads that run boils my blood. 100% placement, even IIMs don't have a 100% placement. Then they come to something called 1 crore, 1.5 crore, 2 crore, 2.5 crore salary packages. They don't have that. There is a lot of, missing links in the whole thing. They mix international offers with domestic offers and say these are the kind of. If you go to USA or UK, you still need to earn about 40,000 pounds to survive. And when you convert that into a 50 lakh rupees salary in India, it is a wrong thing. On a purchasing power parity itself, that 50 lakh there is 7 lakh rupees here. But we don't talk of that. We don't talk of that because there for 30-40,000 pounds is necessary for survival. Here 5-7 lakh rupees is necessary for survival. But you bring that here and show 50 lakh rupees as highest salary. You mix the international and domestic. You remove people saying they opted out for higher studies when you know that you could not place them, and you ask them to opt out of placement process. IIM Kashipur got into this bracket. They insisted that about a few students should be opting out for placement, while they will keep working hard to ensure that they're placed. Why do they want to do that? Because they want to show that of the students who opted for placement, they could place everyone, and everyone who could not place was moved to the opt-out category by requesting them, of course. And if that is the case of in a public institution, just imagine what happens in private institutions. In private institutions, I know for a fact that some of these colleges put in such artificial filters to reduce the number of students who are eligible for placement. They bring in very, very abnormal numbers. They talk of 90% attendance, 75%, 7-8 CGPA, and so on and so forth. So the overall class of students is brought down to less than half. And they essentially would say only so many were eligible for placement. If you tell me, even one of the NITs I saw, about 20% students were ineligible for placement. What makes it, how successful you are as an institution, if 20% of students who are studying under your nose were ineligible for placement? That is the problem that we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who are trying to make a claim for vanity metrics so that they can get the next bunch of students, but they're not bothered about the future of these students who are studying with you, who entrusted you with their career, their life, their home. And this needs to be tackled. So the important question that we must ask is, how do we protect our own children? How do we protect students from these misleading claims? How do we protect even parents from such misleading claims? How do we protect the education ecosystem, the spirit, the soul of education ecosystem from these misleading claims that is destroying education through and through? In my opinion, there are two ways of dealing with it. The first one is make sure that every ad that comes out in the papers is from a prospectus, and the prospectus must be a legally abiding document. It's exactly the same way a prospectus is treated by SEBI, which is Securities Exchange Board of India, when they're protecting investors. There cannot be a claim which is not a part of the prospectus, and there cannot be a prospectus which is not becoming a legal document. It cannot be a marketing brochure. And two, bring in regulatory powers such as SEBI itself. SEBI has very good powers. By the way, UGC also has powers, but it rarely uses that. Just for you people to know, many years back, it fined Reliance Industries because they made a claim that some petroleum and oil and natural gas was found in Godavari basin. When the claim was found to be false, SEBI went after Reliance and made sure that they paid as a penalty. That is the kind of powers that you need. Sometime back, a few years back again, Sahara actually went out saying that they're placing some non-convertible debentures through private placement. Later, it was found that it was not private placement, but across the board, it was raising money from it. So 24,000 crore rupees was refunded back to the investors, or SEBI actually took that money away from Sahara and is by itself trying to refund the investors who paid Sahara as a deposit. But that is because SEBI has powers and it knows how to use those powers. UGC, AICTE, Ministry of Education have been very, very lethargic and very reluctant to actually possibly use these kind of powers. And that is something that we must work on. If you look at the powers that SEBI uses, they're very, very good. And that is the kind of regulator that you need for education also. SEBI has power to investigate companies, and it is through Section 11C of the SEBI Act. SEBI can give binding directions to stop misleading conduct immediately, which means they can also stop some claims being made in the newspapers. It can give monetary penalties, and the penalties can be 3 times of the kind of profits that are given. For example, in the case of Avadhoot Sade that I said, it is trying to reimburse every single student who actually went through Avadhoot Sade based on the false claim, and the amount is 546 crore rupees. So every student who lost out because this man made a false claim is about to be refunded if SEBI wins this particular case. They already have collected 100 crore rupees as an advance. SEBI can debar individuals or companies from capital markets. Just imagine coaching institution or a university or a college is being debarred, or their vice chancellor or chancellor is being debarred because their institution made a false claim. Just imagine that. No one wants that on their name. It can also refund the money. So if something is based on a false claim, you refund the money to all the students who got enticed by that kind of false claim. It can attach properties and recover the assets if the penalty is not paid. SEBI can do that. It can go through criminal prosecution. And that is where I say that UGC has been very lethargic or reluctant in using its powers. Because why can't you file an FIR against all these 32 universities which are fake universities? You know that they're fake universities. You know that they're operating under your very nose in Delhi, some of them. And you know that students are getting misled by them. Just by writing a letter, it doesn't stop your responsibility, doesn't end. You need to go much, much beyond that, which you rarely do. Right? And then it can also do regulation of advertisement. So no advertisement, by the way, by any company that's listed in the stock exchange can go without any legally binding commitments. Right? It cannot be no exaggerated claim. It should be absolutely accurate financial statement. It should be truthful to the prospectus and the IPO document that were filed. So that's the kind of power that we're dealing with. They also act against intermediaries. For example, in the case of education, there are a lot of agents that also missell. In this particular case, in the case of companies, SEBI will make sure that what is done by the intermediary also, they also go after it, and they also go after the principal, in which case is the company itself. It's not that UGC doesn't have powers. UGC has lots of powers. As I said, they are very reluctant to use that. For example, UGC has the power to grant or withdraw recognition of a university. AICTE has the power to cancel an approval for a particular course or a program. Both these regulators, AICTE and UGC, have power to inspect institutions. They have power to issue directions or compliance orders, which can be, regulators can direct institutions to correct misleading claims, to refund illegal fees. How many students have been refunded the fee which is collected illegal. Just think about it. Improve infrastructure, stop admissions in certain programs. It is done, by the way. They did stop some online programs from being delivered because they found them to be illegal or indulging in false claims. Right? They have power to stop admissions of a particular program. They have power to impose financial penalties. They have power to cancel degrees or declare them invalid. There are many universities which gave degrees to people who were not deserving of the degree because the process was not followed. And UGC came up saying that these degrees are invalid. Right? They have power to recommend government action. All these things are there, but they're very, very reluctant to use that. The problem is UGC and AICTE have always used these powers for approval and disapproval. They used it for inspection purposes and for admission bans, but they did not go beyond that of launching criminal probe against universities and institutions because they indulge in fraud or cheating. And that is the problem. They're very, very reluctant as a regulator. The core policy gap that you see is in financial markets, there is protection of investors, there is strict enforcement, very strict enforcement, and strong penalties against companies or corporates which are indulging in fraud or misleading claims. In the case of education institutions, what you have is, they try to protect the students, but very, very weak enforcement, extremely weak enforcement, and rare penalties for misleading claims. I can't find one or two which have where they've penalized institutions for misleading claims, and that is the problem. The reluctance or the lethargy, whatever you call it, is the problem that you're dealing with. So what is it that we must do? I said there are two solutions that we have. The first thing is make sure that every ad that is released by any institution or university is a part of the prospectus and is a part of the mandated disclosure that is given to the AICTE and UGC, which means it must be a part of the official documents filed on an affidavit, which makes it a legally binding document. The second thing is create a oversight power, which is something like SEBI. With all the powers that SEBI has, you must also, the way you are protecting the small investor, protect the student also. And UGC has failed to do this, so you need to go beyond UGC and think about it. UGC has remained a grant institution and a approval and disapproval institution. It has not gone beyond that. The fact that for 20 years the same university is appearing as fake university proves how UGC has looked at its own powers. So we need to go beyond that and create a authority which actually oversees and supports and lends credence to the kind of violation of rights of the students that have happened in the country. And all misleading claims, all misleading advertisements, everything which is a lie must ensure that students are benefited and the institution is punished. When you start punishing institutions, then institutions will fall in line. We've tried this out multiple times over. We've tried out for many years to make sure that people are binding and everything is based on a code of conduct. The code of conduct rarely seems to work. It must go much beyond the code of conduct. That is what you should be looking at. For example, let's talk of disclosure standards. What are the kind of disclosure standards that we need for this country as far as education institution is concerned? And this can be a mandatory disclosure standard that is published on the university website or the college website, or even the coaching institution website. For example, in the coaching institution website, you must talk of how many people succeeded and from which center how many have succeeded. Because we all know that there are some centers where the best faculty teaches, the other are only fee payers. They're not someone who will get the result. The institutions always will do top-performing. And top-performing is essentially an art where, or whatever they do, art or science, but they essentially ensure that the best students or the students with the best potential have the access to the best faculty. And those people who are not performing well are just keep paying the fee, because the coaching institution also knows that they will not likely to succeed. And to that extent, they will not contribute for them to be a marketing thing where the next bunch of 100 to 200,000 students can be snapped in. So we should develop a code of conduct and a disclosure standard. And the disclosure standard is what I'm about to read now at this point in time. The first thing is the total cohort must be published. Don't give us, numbers from different sources. Give me one thing saying what is the total cohort size. And within the cohort also, you must give me program-wise and branch-wise. So for MBA, how many students are there? And if there are specializations, tell me for each specialization, how many students are there. If you have a BTech program, tell me how many branches, and for each program, how many students are there. Not the approval, not just the approval, but also admitted students, right? So, for example, you must say that for CSE, I have 240 students, for electronical ECE, I have 180 students, for MBA, I have 300 students, of which for IB only I have 60 students. That's the kind of disclosure that you need. And that must total up to the total number of students studying in the class, right? Then you must say total students eligible for placement, because one of the things I told you, all these universities and institutions come up with artificial barriers to limit the number of students who are eligible for placement. Even NITs, one of the NIT, I was shocked because 20% students were not eligible to sit for placement. That is wrong. There is something wrong in the education system of an NIT which actually says that 20% of my own students have not reserved up to my mark to even sit for placement, which is what you promised when they actually joined the institution. And just imagine what will happen in a private institution. So that must be stopped. So you must very clearly say total students who are eligible for placement, total who opted for placement. That also should be very, very clear. So you actually have the total intake, the total students who are eligible for placement, total students who actually opted for placement from those who are eligible, and then talk of the total students who are placed. So that's the measure that you have at a branch level, at a program level. Then you must come to the placement rate must be a standard denominator. What it means is the placement rate as a percent of students who opted for placement from the total cohort and from those who are eligible for placement. Both must be disclosed separately. The number of offers must not be confused with the number of students who are unique students who are placed. Many times universities disclose the number of offers because there is one student who might get 10 offers, but it's only one student, remember that. So you cannot talk of the total number of students and the total number of offers. You must talk of total number of students placed, unique students placed, and not be confused with the total number of offers, because that is the confusion that we create. And multiple and supernumerary offers must be removed from this whole thing, because a student getting 5 offers is only one student placed, as I told you, and that must be very clearly mentioned. The branch-wise placement data must be very, very clear, right? You must say that in this particular branch 90%, in this particular branch 70%, and talk along with that the maximum salary, the median salary, and the top 10% and bottom 10%. I'm saying bottom 10% if you disclose the top 10%. I'm talking of bottom salary if you disclose the top salary. If you disclose the maximum salary of one particular child, you must also disclose the minimum salary of another child. If you disclose the top 10% students who and what is the kind of offer you got, then you must also disclose the bottom 10% salary that the bottom 10% child got. That is how you talk of fairness and transparency. Otherwise, it's not transparency. You're only trying to sell the best students and bring in more students from the other side. And that for me is wrong, right? And then moving further, as I said, we're talking of the kind of disclosure standards that I would ideally want it, right? The salary data must be shown using median and not just highest and lowest. I keep saying this, highest salary is a meaningless thing because it's only one student getting it. And in most cases, let me tell you, in most cases, this is an international offer converted from dollars or dirhams or pounds, and then they convert that and put it in rupee terms, right? The bottom 25 must always be disclosed as much as the top 25%. The minimum salary must always be disclosed because you're disclosing the highest salary. The internship and PPO claims must be separated. A lot of people confuse between internship and PPO claims and then try to pass off one for the other. That is wrong. And by the way, whenever you deal with these numbers, there must be an audit which essentially says this is the source of audit and this is how you got that number. And you should be verified and you should be filing an affidavit with the government of India before you go to an ad. If there's an ad of something coming in, it must also be sitting with a regulator saying this is the kind of data that I have, and everything that comes from in the ad must be coming from this particular legally binding document that's filed with the government of India. That's the way you tie down people to say anything that is coming as an ad must come from a larger, legally binding document and not otherwise. And misleading headlines must be stopped completely. All this 100% placement, 100% placement of what? Eligible students or people who opted for placements. Now, from a total cohort, it's different, right? If you talk of 100% placement, then you must also say of the total cohort, how many were placed. And that is how you deal with some kind of a thing. So my simple thing is this, and this is a request to all the regulators, all the government, and even the Prime Minister of India. Let us do something to protect the students. The education ecosystem is going to be destroyed if there is loss of trust between the student and the education institution. And when I say education institution, it can be a university or a college or a coaching institution or a skilling enterprise. But if the student needs to trust them, we need to first protect the student and not these guys. These people will take care of themselves. It is on us to protect the students of this country. And the only way we protect the students of this country is by telling them the truth, not by misleading them through a false path. The NPS that you have in the bank loans that you have is essentially because what's been promised has not been delivered and the students are unable to pay the NPAs, the loans also. The EMIs are not being paid. And all this because we have misled them through the garden path. We owe it to them. We owe it to the country. We owe it to ourselves to make sure that our children are not misled. It can be your children and my children. but we owe it to our children to make sure that they are told the truth of what to expect and what not to expect, what is real and what is false. And when they walk into a particular college or a course, they must exactly know what should be expected of them and what they can expect if they were to give their best. Unless we protect our children, this country, the demographic dividend of this country is going to be a nightmare. Can we do this? Can we raise a voice to protect our own children? That is a big question that we should ask ourselves. Are we doing enough to protect our children is something that we should ask ourselves. I hope this campaign will go to the next level, where all of us start demanding that the student must be protected, our children must be protected, so that the country is protected. Thank you so much. Namaste.